and and in that context where, a silent vigil, a meeting between Jews and Palestinians, a poster with a hostage, the information about someone being held hostage, these things were seen as treason. uh, there was still organizing going on. There was still movement building going on in the networks that I'm a part of, which include folks from around the world, Israeli Jews, Palestinians, people doing their best to organize in these contexts. And one important part of that network has been something that's called the Radical Bloc. Um, and this is a group of activists that started to organize over a year ago after this government entered office, this Netanyahu government with figures such as Ben Gvir and Smotrich. And so this Radical Bloc was showing up to all of the anti-Netanyahu protests with an anti-apartheid message, with a message that you can't, there's no such thing as returning to a democracy that wasn't really democracy. There's no democracy with occupation. And sort of coming to the center of these anti-Netanyahu protests that were sort of demanding to go back to the status quo of occupation and apartheid, but with a perhaps more centrist government. And this Radical Bloc was sort of speaking up in the center of those spaces to say that's impossible. We have to end apartheid. That bloc, that group of organizers, reemerged after October 7th, and has been some of the people out in the streets regularly across from the central base of the Ministry of Defense in the center of Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, in Haifa, in city centers, trying to shine a light on what's going on in Gaza. Something that Israeli TV and Israeli media in general, by and large, isn't showing. They're showing, of course, their side of it. They're showing loss of life of soldiers, updates about hostages, but very little about the human lives being taken and the destruction in Gaza. And so these organizers are out in the streets trying to do that in a context where that's seen as high treason. I think it's important to say that group involves people that come from, it's called the Radical Bloc, but I think many people would see themselves as radical politically, and others might see themselves as more moderate, but finding that even so, that space is where they can organize, because calling for a ceasefire is seen as radical in Israeli Jewish society. Calling for a shared future is considered radical and treasonous in Israeli Jewish society, in sort of, by and large, and in the mainstream rather, and that's the context in which this organizing is happening in. In my particular corner of the movement, in the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, we have successfully over the last 3 or 4 months pivoted from what we planned to do, as I mentioned before, bringing activists from around the world to join in the olive harvest in the West Bank. We, in November, held a solidarity fundraiser to raise money for communities in the West Bank that we're connected to, where people were basically under lockdown, unable to move, unable to access food, medicine, clothes, school, lands for sheep and goats to graze on. And so we had, I think, what was the most successful fundraiser in our organization's history. People really showed up. People really saw the need, and amid all of this destruction and devastation, it was moving to see that kind of response. After that, we've been focused on organizing people from around the world to come and join movement spaces on the ground. So we organized some activists in a sort of independent context to join in protective presence efforts in the West Bank. And now, just 1 week ago, our group that we've been doing every year during shepherding season was starting around now, and for 3 months is in the South Hebron Hills. They've just arrived a week ago to Jerusalem. They're in orientation, and they'll be there through to the end of April, doing protective presence work, documenting human rights abuses, helping to organize movement space down there and other activists to get down there to the South Hebron Hills, Masafra Yatta, if you've heard that regional name. So all of this is taking place. There is protests, there are demonstrations, there are people building an alternative. There is rapid response, there is protective presence. One of my coworkers said this a few months ago, but I think a time like this, at a time like this, the government and the powers that be will do everything they can to break the very notion of solidarity, and that has not been broken. That is ongoing, and that is rooted in deep relationships and trust, built through co-resistance and experience together, opposing occupation and apartheid. And so that's been my movement experience from my vantage point. And I think it's important to say that the left over there is small. We're not winning. I think that's important to say, period. And in many ways, by many measures, that's gotten worse since October 7th. But we are growing, and we were growing before, and we are growing since. Even if we're not winning yet, we are growing, and I think it's important to sort of highlight, amplify, and support the people who are doing this organizing. And you can't compare the situations and experiences of Israelis and Palestinians at this moment, or really at any moment. But and that's I think within all of the sort of contextual understanding and connections that we make as activists in this movement, wherever we are around the world, it's essential to facing state repression. It's essential to ending this reality and building a better future to support those courageous people. We don't have a lot of time for questions. If you could stick around and have more questions, we have another gentleman now from Laura.
Thank you, Daniel, for your presence and for your resistance. We congratulate you. And I know it's tough and you're still surviving. I know we've sent David down there a few times. Well, we didn't send him, he went on his own to Israel, Palestine, to work on the resistance for the Palestinian struggle. Can you stick around a little bit, or
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I think it's there's so many urgent things happening that need our attention and energy, and I'm grateful for a little time to just let you know a little bit of my experience and some of the context that I'm organizing in, and some of my movement partners over there. So really, thank you for making the space.
Thank you at 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, whatever it is